Well, thank you all for being here for Meet Magento Singapore. So far, so great, I think. We're now getting ready to embark on this B2B story. So we've got just a scant 30 minutes to dig into this fairly broad topic. I mean, we could actually, I'm pretty sure we could have an entire conference day dedicated to this. But for we all like to get together and talk about the challenges that we face, where we think things are going. So we figured we'd just get up here on stage and do this for everyone's benefit. So I will just let everyone hear your names one more time so they can put names to faces, and maybe just mention also again the company you're from.
I'm Vatsal Shah from Pragmatic Consultancy. I'm a business coach and help offline business go online.
I'm David, and I run Moni. We are a digital agency that specializes in e-commerce.
This is Sudhir. I work for Ranosys as a customer success manager. I'm based in Singapore and helping a lot of clients here in Singapore and APAC for their digital commerce, especially in B2B and B2C as well.
Hirokazu from Veriteworks in Japan. I'm in Magento agency in Japan and specialized development and localization.
And being that we have such a group of hardworking people, and myself, we have a lot of experience, I think, on stage, digging into B2B, and especially the really rich B2B ecosystem that exists here in Asia Pacific. So I'd like to just throw out there for the panelists what you see as predominant trends, either existing now or possibly even just coming up with B2B in this region. Go for it.
Yeah, what I can see is there is a lot of room for B2B improvement. People in Asia, specifically in India, from where I come, I can see B2C commerce, like Magento Commerce Cloud has picked up fine. And now people are gearing up for automation in B2B, because now B2B has fantastic features which helps them automate their current processes like quote, negotiation, multi-channel fulfillment, and so on. So it's gearing up, and I can see it will grow by 5x in coming year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of trends we're seeing, and when you look at B2C or B2B, you can see that some of those trends overlap. So obviously AI and AI application in the B2B is growing. How AI is going to help solving problems around customer service, automations, but also around dynamic pricing, how to manage better pricing. We see also big data analytics tools to better manage stock inventory and so on. We also see personalization, mobile first, and we also see omni-channels, which is, on the B2B side, today sellers need to see also all the multiple channels that they can be involved with. So already it's spanned around all those areas.
Okay, I mean, I think one of those big challenges there in that space is identifying the customer across all these different touch points, and the history of interaction that you've had with them, and that's where I certainly see the analytics solutions coming in to help merchants better know when their customers are being engaged and how. Yeah, I can see that. Anyone else?
So the predominant trend which we are seeing is now, along with B2C, B2B companies are also looking for investing more money and time in technology, because they have realized the potential of the digital commerce. They understand that people going for digital commerce, we can see a lot of Gartner and Forrester research report. We can say customers prefer brands which are on adopted digital commerce earlier. So to stay ahead to stay ahead of competitive and gain a competitive advantage, people are going with digital commerce. They are investing more on front end as well as back end and integrating. As David said, that they are also putting the focus on the omni-channel to provide experience. So the traditional retail channel like manufacturing and food industry, so they are more in traditional. They are also investing more time and money in terms of technology and how, because their focus is more on reorder. their main focus, because they have a yearly term with their distributor or their retailers, they focus more on reorder. So the biggest trend is coming on, how they can create loyalty among their reordering. So that's how they're investing more in technology, because it's always a pain to work in spreadsheet, working with your salesperson. So that's one trend which I feel during my customer interviews and the discussion with customers.
Yeah, there are still some pretty amazing, alarming, depressing statistics out there about the use of fax machines, the use of managing these reorder processes via email. That would certainly, I think, we know we're better than this, right? We know we can make that experience a better experience, and the end game, more orders, better order value every time. Nishi-san, anything from you?
So for the B2B is a part of the supply chain management. Is so there used to be many big companies built their own platform, and recently they keep so many costs to keep their own platform. So they aims to change the platform into open source based or well built, and so. They hope to increase the sales, and also customer needs the optimized experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I know you and I've had many of these conversations in Japan, where this is a particularly common that you have people on these native platforms, and I think you also have this we also see this a bit in China. Where you just have these homegrown or at least very regionally specific platforms, and if you want to do anything, if you want to avail yourself of new trends or move into new markets, it can be quite limiting. So your point about the open, that speaks to my heart when you talk about open source really opening up opportunities for people. So very good. So specifically, since this is a Magento conference, and I'm probably like the worst evangelist in the world, I will fully admit that sometimes Magento is not as great a fit for one person as it is for another, or for one business as it is another. But because this is a Magento conference, and I think Magento tends to fit in more places than most other softwares. I'd like to talk about what happened with 2.2. We released an actual native B2B set of features. Now, the interesting thing is, up to that point, Magento is already an industry leader in B2B deployments. And that's simply because I think of the open core, the flexibility of the platform, that people were able to build some pretty innovative solutions that spoke to customer needs. And what we did for B2B was we actually took this body of knowledge that our community had developed, and we essentially built the most common feature sets, and we built them for customization, right? So we built them with RESTful endpoints that you could then take this functionality and add onto it. At least that was the goal. And we did this with a really involved alpha and beta program with our partners. And all along the way, I kept checking, and it seemed like their reports so that we did a pretty good job. But I would like to check that assumption publicly with you all to see what experiences you may have had with B2B in Magento, and see exactly what 2.2 has done to help or maybe hinder.
Yeah, what I can see is with 2.2 B2B experience, it is almost all dream features people need, a mid-scale agency needs, or mid-scale merchant needs. That it has quick ordering, it has negotiation, which is amazing tool, which is by default happens in B2B industry. It has split ordering and split shipping. It's amazing. And what I can see is if you can include in further number of channels B2B has, like layers. I think that is the current gap which I can see in B2B solution. But with that, I think it's ready to go. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Magento has always been a good platform for B2B because of the scalability and the flexibility and the customization. Because often with B2B, what we see is that there is a lot of integration with a legacy system, ERPs and so on, and Magento provide that integration level, so that's a good thing. The scalability also, especially in B2B, on the size of catalogs, product and SKUs, which is way often bigger than what we see in B2C. And Magento handled that very well. And order management with a more complex shipping process with B2B, where you have to draw, unlike B2C where you ship to one address, often in B2B you ship to multiple addresses, you take the inventory from multiple warehouses, and the shipping delivery is way more complex than on B2C. So Magento provide that, and in that respect, it provide a faster way to go to market that other platform.
Okay.
So on adding to David's notes, so I remember when we did when Magento was focusing only on B2C. We remember doing one engagement where we had to implement B2B, doing a lot of exchange and customization. And after Magento 2.2, we can see that 80% of the use cases are already there in the B2B version. Whether it is company account management, it's regarding the quotes, reorder, requisition list. So most of the things Magento 2.2 covers very well. And we understand that in B2B, the buying process is very complex from both the end, from the buyer and seller. From the buyer end, there'll be a group of stakeholders who will be reviewing the codes, who will be sending the codes and approving. So there are a lot of company structure would involve. So Magento has beautifully implemented the company structure in terms of doing that part. So this is one good part in B2B. You can do a hierarchy and you can set roles and permission for each users who wants to create a code and who can approve and who can finally go. So and you can always create and just track this. And so the quotation engine is very beautiful in terms of because as a B2B buyer and seller, we can see there's a lot of exchange of emails, telephone calls, fax machine. We have a lot of communication over there. So the quotation engine, which in Magento and Build, it comes with the two-way communication where people can just connect. They can do a negotiation, the work on discounts, and then it's really good that 2.2 enables companies as well as buyers to give an easy way to do business.
Right, because that all that interaction, that history, that dialogue is all there heads up so that one CSR can actually, should be able to go through if they're speaking with a customer who's been handled by some other CSR, they can actually see that history of conversation in those negotiations, right? Yeah, I think that is probably important.
I would like to add one more point, the wish list creation. Like you can handle almost 99. And when I say B2B buyers, our B2B buyers, they have many people doing procurement from their company. So when they have organized and structured and multiple people putting wish list, it is awesome to manage there. And it's actually done fantastic.
Interesting. Good to know. Wow. So that's a very feel-good set of answers. What about digging in though? Because I'd say it's a foregone conclusion. It should be a foregone conclusion that, something I'm always finding myself saying on stage is that commerce is always custom. Different platforms deal with this reality in different ways. I mean, if you're dealing with a SaaS platform, then they build a set of features and you kind of handle that through configuration. Or maybe you can do some specific add-ons within particular boundaries. In the Magento world, obviously, anything goes, sometimes for better or for worse. And then when we get into B2B, though, I think you get into an even much deeper and nuanced customization work, because you're really starting to represent, you're starting to balance that representation of business process, in this software flow. So in your relative experience encountering that, whether it's with Magento or not, but I guess the answer should be specific to Magento's abilities, what do you find are the challenges that you have to face, either once or consistently with implementations?
When I say typical business flow in India, I previously said that there are multiple channels and the labels are there in B2B. So you can find always manufacturers selling to the wholesale buyers, and then there can be a couple of layers in between. So what happens is when we automate with the Magento or any automation tool we pick up, what happens is some of the channels in between feels the threat of losing the business because one can directly connect to the third layer. And because of that, what happens is implementing that and their acceptance toward the system is one of the challenge. And that's where I said that when Magento can have multiple channel management isn't one of the feature, it becomes easy and it will be far more acceptable by the middle layers as well. Because what happens is you are manufacturer, then there is warehouse distributor, then distributor and retailer. So this Magento has a great capability of managing team, but when you talk about different players who is in the value chain, if we accommodate that, I think that is one of the challenge I can see. Rest is great.
Wow, that sounds. Get my brain hurting a little bit thinking about the solution for that. Anyone else see anything? And also feel free to speak. I don't know if you've encountered problems that were perhaps solved in whole or in part by our order management suite. Jump in.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that point is one of the specificity of B2B is also the pricing, the tier pricing system that they have and how you manage that. And that comes also to the personalizations. There is two parts we also always find challenging is the pricing part. Every customer theoretically could have a different pricing. So you need to have some kind of dynamic pricing in the back and also the product, because in B2B we see product attributes in B2C are typically 20, 50, 20, 30 product attributes. In B2B, it can go to 500 product attributes. So that makes it very complicated on the top of, on top of the dynamic pricing issue.
Yeah, the indexation there can become the challenge.
In my experience, I mean, the challenge is one from the technology end and one from the business end. So from business end, what B2B guys, they are heavily investing in terms of adopting technology. But the B2B, traditionally they are working with their channel partners, their distributors, and now they are thinking about going for a B2B, B2C journey. That's where one of the challenges is coming in. If they go for a B2C journey, there might be channel conflict. So this is one of the a channel conflict. So in terms of implementing the B2B and B2C, it could be done in such a way that the fulfillment is done by the B2B partners so that there can be a reducing channel conflict. And second most important challenge is in terms of catalog. I mean, as David mentioned about the product attributes. So in terms of one of our customer in marine industry, so they have, if you go with their particular products, so one engine has 500 different parts. So the kind of cataloging and, giving the product attributes and providing that, it's really become challenge. So in that kind of thing, they still need a salesperson to come, sit with them, explain the entire process that this part is from this purpose, this industry, this is specification, certification. So in this kind of arrangement, definitely digital commerce would not be helpful in terms of providing the first orders, but it would more helpful for salespersons to equip with the right solution. They can have on their tablets or they can have their own system. They can just provide the information to their customers. And it becomes more handy in terms of reordering, because once customer understands the entire thing, they did the quality inspection. I think that's become more important where B2B provide a good solution for reordering and building loyalty. Yep.
So in my experience, some merchants has over millions of products, but they have a combination in the millions by millions. And it's too much complex, and each option has a dependent conditions and something. So for B2B scene, we need to solve these complex orders process, and also sometimes they paid in advance and in half, and later they pay left money after the product is shipped or received or something.
Okay. Yeah, so partial payment. I mean, and then there's also, I know in some place, I think actually India, there's well, in B2B in general, you end up with these invoicing constructs that just don't exist in most markets in B2C. But yeah, so that does sound like an interesting, interesting challenge to solve with the accounting, the accounting, limited accounting functionality that Magento will serve.
One weird one weird requirement I came across from my chemical and textile client. What happens is their industry, they have a blanket order for a year. And what happens is shipping is done on demand. So consider that I say 1,000 ton of goods. And then I ask you to ship 500 tons this month. Maybe after 3 months, I will ask more 100 tons and so on. And at that time, price keeps on changing into the market. Now fulfilling such order with the automation tool, because it captures your order at one go. But what happens is then your shipping is splitted over a period of time. Managing such scenario is also one of the challenges.
Interesting. So in that case, we'll say this is like commodity pricing, right? And it's tied. Are they locking in that price when they buy it?
Yeah. So it's a blanket price. I negotiate, say, in a year I will buy 10,000 tons. What's the price? And then you say one price. And then I lock it for, say, 10 months, and then I keep on buying at the periodic intervals. And that becomes challenge for a SI to implement.
Okay, so now the way it would work would, I guess the only way is a CSR would get this request to, ship another 100 tons, and then he or she would actually have to know to like go through the history and say, okay, well, here was the negotiated rate. And I do see how that could be automated when it's necessary, because I can also think that a separate, you could have almost the opposite be true, where someone wants you to procure over time this much, but then the price will actually will vary based on market price at that time. And you can imagine thinking of all of these possible scenarios and building them into Magento really doesn't work, right? Because you end up with solving a lot of problems that don't apply to most people, and that's a recipe for very, very big software.
I think the feature is there in B2B where you can set the expiry date for the quotation negotiated price. So instead of as in company, you will have an idea that for these kind of customer, I have already negotiated this price, so they'll have a good idea on the inventory or supply chain, so they can go plan for in advance. And the second thing, the challenge, if we are talking about challenge, where CEOs, the people who are investing money in this, they also want results, that how the platform has worked for us. They are looking more in data. They want to know, who are my most, top customers, who are my top sellers, category products. So I think that's where the MBI, Magento Business and Intelligence, works, and it's beautifully worked because apart from their 75 out-of-box reports, they also provide a quotation. You can track, the quotation to order conversion ratio. You can track the customer lifetime value, who has ordered in last month, who are your top 5 customers, and even the one of the challenge where salesperson, as in sales, we are also, technology will come, who will, credit us that, this sales comes through technology channel or from the actual sales guy. So you can also track the salesperson performance through the B2B commerce, because the MBI, because it provides the performance of your salesperson and, the kind of revenue generated from each month or each day, that kind of functionality.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out actually that I have a colleague here from Magento. She actually came in through our acquisition of RJ Metrics, which has become Magento Business Intelligence. And her name's Leah. She's brown hair and a white shirt today, and so she'll probably be hanging out at the booth. If you have some questions about MBI, there's absolutely not a better person. Certainly on the island of Singapore right now, I think who understands MBI more than Leah does. So please feel free to have a chat with her if you're interested. It is. I mean, the goal of that product, if you can reduce it to one statement, is really just to give meaningful insight. True, deep, meaningful insight into your valuable customers. And that was one of the things that happens with that product. Actually, is that how people who onboard with MBI all of a sudden discover that what they thought were their high value customers actually weren't so high value, and at least in terms of maybe where they were spending their marketing dollars, like the cost of acquiring, against the return. These people were probably going to engage anyway. Put your money elsewhere and activate a whole different segment. A lot of good stuff to unpack in there, and then also there's also a solid RESTful API that you can get all of this data that's being realized in this apparatus. You can get it right back out and pump that into your supply chain systems, into your accounting systems, et cetera. It's been a pretty solid addition to the Magento family. And then now with being part of Adobe, I suppose we have a much bigger analytics apparatus to start working with as time goes on. I'm sure some smart people back in the ivory towers in San Jose are figuring out these product alignments as we speak. Well, it was interesting hearing some of these challenges. Any other just war story kind of requirements that you've dealt with? I'm sure there must be a few more.
I think what we see also in Asia, which is a little bit more complicated than you could see in Europe or in the US, is the market fragmentations. Because a lot of the B2B we do, if you look at just Southeast Asia, there is a number of languages, but when you look at North Asia with China and Korea and Japan and so on, it can become awfully complicated when you manage not only a large scale of product, but also different languages and different pricings for all those countries. So I think that make it unique with Asia, and Magento addressed that very nicely with all the features there are for multi-language and so on.
I think we still have a decimal issue that my friends in Japan and Indonesia are slowly working on here. I was thinking, do you have another point?
I was just saying maybe about China. There is also, few issues there. But
yes. We are, and so one of the nice things with some of my colleague in the next room, Max, from the community engineering team, if you are interested, if you find maybe that the level of localization or internationalization relative to the markets that you or your customers are working in. If you're finding some challenges there, you can reach out to me or to Max, and we can activate some country-specific contribution channels to help. And then it just comes down to really engaging with the local market to help solve some of these problems, because a lot of these problems get solved individually in each market. We just actually need to collect that in a meaningful way and get it into our repositories so that other people can avail themselves of this work and continue to make Magento viable in more places. If it's okay with you guys, I think I'd like to open up. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'd like to open up to see if anyone has any questions. I'll hand over my mic so that everyone in the room can hear. So what do you think? What are your B2B in APAC questions? Anyone? Moliati, I know you have one.
Now, I don't know if any of you dealing with any open source client that wanted to into B2B. Now with the B2B becoming only Commerce Edition features, will that create a new challenge for you guys where you have a client maybe starting from open source and want to upgrade to Commerce Edition? But now you have to dealing with all the whole data migration and stuff like that because some of the core features now become on the Commerce Edition.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the...
No, I mean, any of you dealing with a client where starting with the open source Magento and they already invest on B2B features, now and they want to go to Commerce Edition, when they upgrade, now become a big challenge because Commerce Edition now have a certain way of how the B2B have to be handled. Now you have to dealing with the data migration, you have to dealing with a structure change. I mean, do you ever have that problem, or?
You mean really about moving from commerce to?
From the open source moving
Yeah.
to Commerce Edition now, because since the B2B is become
Yeah.
become a key element features on the Commerce Edition, right? So now the open source people already invest so much on the extension, on the B2B functionality. Now you have to move them into Commerce Edition. That's a big challenge change, right? Because now it's become a features. Are you cutting over, just upgrading the extension and keeping that way, or are you actually moving everything into the Commerce Edition core features B2B? I mean, what is the strategy?
Yeah, when it comes to those kind of upgrade, or even migrating from one platform to the other, there is not too much shortcut to that. It depends on how complex the initial platform is. We always look at what we can import in. Product is the base, but then customers. Then when it comes to orders, do you want all your orders history, and how do you, those orders history import can be quite challenging to do, especially when there is a large sample of data. When it comes to all extensions, some of them might be easier to import or to migrate. Some of them might just don't work. So. We have a certain process to migrating those platforms, and we see what breaks. We go first a very straightforward migration and see what breaks, and then from there we try to see if we need to build up from scratch or if we can still salvage some of the work that's been done before. That's the usual approach we have to that.
From the business perspective, one of my client who is apparel manufacturer, I'm not a Magento SI, I'm a business coach. So one of my client in US is apparel manufacturer. So one of the SI has implemented a lot of customization to make B2B viable over Magento community for them. Now the concern is cost benefit analysis over TCO when they need to reinvest in going in the enterprise. But at the same time, what happened is we can showcase some of the features which was not there built with them, like segmentation, group-specific pricing, and some of the great features B2B has that client got convinced. It's more towards how you pitch a customer. Yeah, I understand that it is a one-time, again, they are spending money, but if you look at the long-term advantage, it works well for them. Yes, but it is a challenge to convince them on TCO.
Maybe, of course, Magento open source can upgrade to Magento Commerce, but as you know, Commerce has extended database structure, and depending on the database scale, you need to wait a long time to upgrade the database, and also check the old extension or your custom implementation's compatibility against the Magento Commerce. I think this is possible, but sometimes makes a nightmare project by the bad implementation or not sophisticated structure.
Yeah, sometimes starting over can be much easier. Yeah, it does. I guess it does. It's a good question. It's a good thought. And then I think we will have be remiss to not mention some of the changes that'll be happening soon, right? Because we have with largely the community's help, have completely reimagined stock modeling, inventory modeling and handling in Magento. So this is the MSI, multi-source inventory project. It's been like the feature that just couldn't make it above the cut in Magento since like 2010. There was always a little stub code in there for multi-source inventory. But with the community's help and the guidance of the community engineering team, this feature will be part of 2.3, and actually it deprecates Magento's native current stock handling. And then in 2.4, I believe the aim is to completely remove it. I'm sure we'll will take the market temperature based for that decision. But going forward in 2.3, you actually have it is a robust code base unto itself. I mean, I think almost 25% again the size of Magento's native core, just to do all of the things, basically to all the ways that we need to prepare for how people handle stock and stock coming from multiple locations, and how stock is reserved and unreserved, et cetera. This is a very big implementation, and I think it will have some impact going forward. And this will be both for B2B and B2C use cases, but probably B2B, because I imagine that where there is a need for advanced multi-source inventory features, if that's already been answered, it's probably been answered in a different way than how we've done it for our MSI project. Yeah, I'll be interested. So you should probably be aware of that, and I'll be interested to hear the stories that people will have of sort of migrating to or not migrating to, or just integrating with this new approach. Any other questions out there? Everyone just thinking about the grand lunch that I know we've heard about. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Nitesh. Assume third-party people matching buyers with seller. Okay, does Magento provide any kind of business intelligence or a model which can match these two based on their code or their products, to streamline the process of matching these RFQs with the buyer's requirement?
Not that I'm aware. Does anyone know?
It's not for marketplace as of now.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, for marketplace, I think we have to do customization. It's not.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a some third-party vendor with an integration that could take product data, and I guess using the categorizations that exist out there. But I'm trying to figure out how this would work in a generally applicable way. And clearly, I'm not the entrepreneur to start this business. It's an interesting thought, though, right? Are you thinking in terms of the selection criteria? Would that be geographical, or are you thinking in terms of just this, like this automation mechanism where, say, like, I need to buy 10 widgets, I'm in this market, I expect to pay this much, now go find me suppliers for that? Is that?
Yeah, kind of like that. And the matching will be based on geographical as well as in terms of product category and the money.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we don't do that natively, other than with multi-source inventory. It should actually geographically select the warehouse, but then having a some kind of price scaler there, I don't think that's in the scope. You could certainly build it. So maybe you just started a new business.
I would like to add, the feature is not there. We are implementing in one of the engagement. It's not exactly the same which you are looking for. In our engagement, it's in a B2B and B2C portal. It's an NGO, which what we are doing is it's a multi-country store, and customer can access from Asia Pacific, and the customer requests come, let's suppose coming from India or China, so it will automatically detect, it will send the order to the nearest location distributor. So that's kind of configuration which we have done, that it will qualify based on the location, state or territory. It will send to the next nearest distributor, and if the entire order quantity is not with the distributor, the system will check and it will send to the next. So it will try 2 or 3 combination, the system to the intelligence, and if still not there, it will go to the headquarter location. That's where they do it in manual process. So system has its own limitations. System can do a play with the 2 or 3 combination, and some little bit of manual work also needed. So that's how we are implementing in one of the engagement.
All things are ultimately possible with Magento, despite what Karen sometimes says. Well, I want to thank you all for spending time with us for this B2B discussion. I'd also like to thank our panelists, Vatsal, David, Sudhir, and Nishi-san. And now I think, is it lunchtime? It is lunchtime, so I would encourage everyone to go in the marketplace, I assume. Go enjoy some delicious Singaporean fare, and we'll be back here in about an hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.